I've been getting a lot of invitations to parties. One thing I like about this time of year, I went to a party last Saturday night. I'm going to a party tonight. I've been invited to a church party next Saturday night. Who's planning to come next Saturday night to the church party? Okay. I'm kind of an outgoing sort, and so I like parties. But you have to be careful at parties. Parties can be tricky. For example, what do you do if you go to a party and you don't know anybody? That can be uncomfortable. You stand over in a corner, someone comes up, gives you something to eat, talks for a little while, but you don't really have that background of relatedness. You don't really feel a connection. So sometimes a party, which is supposed to be fun, ends up being something you kind of endure. You kind of get through it, and you go home. You go because you want to be polite. Now here's another problem that comes up at parties. What do you do if you get invited to a party and you really don't want to go? Now usually you don't get invited to parties by people you don't know. So you can't say, well, I don't want to go because I really don't know you. So if you don't want to go, but you know the person, and you don't want to hurt their feelings, what do? That can be a real social dilemma. Have you ever been in that situation? You got invited to a party and you really didn't want to go? Yeah, Trevor. We all have Trevor. It can be problematic. Now here, for those of you who get into that situation, I want to give you a few pointers, things I've learned along the way. Little practical tips on how to deal with parties, especially if you don't want to go. First of all, don't commit at the first invitation. This is very important. For example, if I say to you, do you want to go to a party next Saturday night? Go, next Saturday night? I think I've got something scheduled, but I'll check my book. Have you ever heard that when you invited somebody to a party? You know, let me check. I just want to give you a little tip. They don't want to go to your party. Another one that I just received recently, I hate to admit it, I asked a woman to a party, and she said, sorry, I already have other plans. You ever gotten the I already have other plans excuse? Yes. That can be troubling, and so you don't really know. I mean, I don't know if she wants to go to parties with me or not. You know, was it just this one she didn't want to go because she's really got other plans? Or does she not want to say, I wouldn't want to go to a party with you, but I don't really want to tell you I don't want to go to a party with you. So what I'm going to say is I have other plans. And that's generally a good way to kind of worm your way through. Jesus got invited to a lot of parties. One of the most interesting things about Jesus is that he always seemed to get into trouble when he went to parties. Now, if you seem to get into trouble when you go to parties, you're in good company. Sometimes he'd go to parties and people would hear that he went to this party. And there were people at the party that Jesus went to who were drinkers. Absolutely, they drink. And he went to that party, so he must be a drinker too. That's not right. He would get into trouble for that. He almost got in trouble at a wedding party because they ran out of wine. And he almost got into trouble with who? His mother. Now, if there's one person you don't want to get in trouble with, it's your mother, I would think. But he almost did, because she came to him and she said, the party is starting to, the party's starting to get to a point here where we're running out of wine and it may not go so well. We want to have a good time. Would you help us? And she said, well, no, I really don't think so. It's not my time, and I'm not going to do it. And so I think she at that point gave him the look. Now the Bible doesn't say, and then his mother gave him a look. But sometimes mothers, when their sons say no, sometimes their mothers give them the look. And then it does record he went ahead and provided their wife. So he almost got into trouble. Now our story today that I want to look at very closely is about a party. And it's a tricky one to follow, so you got to pay very close attention. So if you come to church and normally you find yourself sleeping a little bit, thinking about what you're going to have for lunch, thinking about what your activities are, if you do that, you might miss something today. So you got to pay close attention because there's a lot of parties going on. There's a party over here, a party over here, a party down here, a party up here. There's people at a party. There's a story about a party. In the story, there's a story about a party. And none of it has to do with the party that's going on in the story. Did you follow all that? Good. I don't want you to follow it because then you'll pay attention. So let's open our Bibles. So Luke 14. Luke 14. Remember I said parties can be tricky. I did a little research on where parties, that term, comes from. And you know where it comes from? What language? Anybody? French. Now who speaks French? Anybody here speak French? Thank you. And what does partir, P-A-R-T-I-R, mean in French? What? Hello?
To go.
To go? Oh, no, that's not quite it. P-A-R-T-I-R. Partir. Really? Well, I looked it up and it said to divide. To divide. Like a partition, you know, divide something. And you look at political parties. Do they bring people together or do they divide us? And actually, when you go to a party, oftentimes it can be kind of a dividing event because sometimes you get an invitation to a party, sometimes you don't get an invitation to a party. A party actually can be a dividing event. You might say denominations are religious parties. Do they bring us together or do they divide us? Good questions. And this party that Jesus was at was actually designed to divide. It was designed to divide. So let's look at Luke 14. Earlier, Jesus had gotten into trouble because he had healed a woman on Sabbath. And Luke 13, behold, there was a certain woman in verse 11 who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, was bent over and could no way raise herself up. Luke 13:11. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said, Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity. And he laid his hands on her. Immediately she was made straight and glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And he said to the crowd, There are 6 days on which men ought to work. Therefore come and be healed on them. Don't be healed on the Sabbath day. So Jesus was already in trouble because of his Sabbath practices. He was already in trouble with the Pharisees over healing on the Sabbath. The relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees was coming to a head. And Luke 14 probably takes place 1 week before Jesus was crucified. 1 week before Jesus was crucified, he went to a party. And we know that he was in trouble because, again, in Luke 13 and verse 31, some of the sympathetic Pharisees came to Jesus and warned him about going to Jerusalem. In verse 31, it says, On that very day some Pharisees came to him saying, Get out, depart from here. Herod wants to kill you.